is so paper thin, like a house of cards, one blow from caving in. Do you ever feel already buried deep, 6 feet under screens, but no one seems to hear a thing? Do you know that there's still a chance for you, 'cause there's a spark in you. You just gotta ignite the light and let it shine. Just own the night like the 4th of July. 'Cause baby, you're a firework. Come on, show 'em what you work. Make 'em go, ah, ah, ah. You're gonna leave 'em go, boom, boom, boom. Even brighter than the moon, moon, moon.
Thank you for being here. I am Margaret Graziano. I go by Maji, and today we're going to have a conversation for igniting feminine power and leadership in every area of life. There was a time not too long ago that if you wanted to buy a house, you needed your husband as a co-signer on the mortgage application. Same thing for cars, same thing for any major purchase. And that was just in the last 2 decades. We now have more women in leadership than we've ever had, but it's taken a massive effort on many women's part to make that happen. What Ignite Power is about, it is about you owning who you are and the life you want to live in every single area of life that's important. In fitness and in health, in being a mother or a wife, in being a working businesswoman, in being a leader, in being a teacher, in being an architect, whatever is important to you, health, fitness, well-being, state of mind. That's what Ignite Power is about. So we are going to skip that, and we're going to begin with intention. And I'd like to read you a poem by William Ernest Henley. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried out loud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged the punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate and the captain of my soul. That's Invictus by William Ernst Henley. And the key of igniting power, whether you're a man or a woman, and in this case, this is for women leaders, is getting in touch with who you are at the core. I was talking to my coach yesterday, and she said, tell me about how the mind works. And as soon as she asked me that question, it was clear to me that everything I needed to know already was inside me. And that's the same for you. I'm here to talk to you about igniting power, but the reality is you don't need anything to ignite your own power. You need to have an intention that's important to you. You need to be clear about what that intention is. And then you need to live your life in accordance with that intention. In the year 2000, my sales coach, Tom Schaff, asked me to go do a program with Jack Canfield. Back then it was called Success Principles. And in that year, I did many different programs, but Jack was one of the programs. And I also got into Coaches Training Institute. Both journeys took me in the future 20 years. And that was, the future would have been 2020. Back then, I owned a recruiting company, and the only future I could see before doing the work that I'm about to share with you was a better form of recruiting company. Oh, I was going to be better, different, smarter, faster, unique, but I couldn't see outside of the 4 walls of being a recruiter and owning a recruiting company. And then when I did this workshop, I had the opportunity to visit myself 20 years in the future. And sit down with myself and have a conversation with myself and create the future that I wanted. And out of that active meditation came that I would live in Northern California, where the weather suited my not just mental health, but physical health. And not only would I live in Northern California, I would lead mind, body, and spiritual retreats for executives who wanted to create environments that were a manifestation of their own core values. And not only would I live in Northern California and would I do retreats like that, but I myself would be living my ideal life and operating at my highest level of consciousness. And after I created the intention, I stayed recruiting and I stayed in Chicago until one day when I was leading a seminar for an organization that I used to lead seminars for, and it was called Velocity. And in the Velocity seminar, we look at areas of our life that we had a goal, we had a dream, but we forgot about it. We stopped thinking it was possible. And in that Velocity seminar, when I was declaring what I had given up on, I realized that, oh my God, I think California is something I have to do when I retire after I've been successful. And I realized that no, I could exponentially get whatever I wanted in the moment. And from that point forward, I've been making choices congruent with that intention. And that's really what Ignite Power is about. It's tapping in to your essential wisdom and tuning in to your core values and turning on actions that will get you exactly where you want to go when you want to go there. And that's what we're up to today and in our workshop. I want to tell you about Tiffany Tremmel. So Tiffany was in one of my initial cultural transformation programs. She and her boss reached out to us because there was trouble in paradise where Tiffany worked. There was a manufacturing company, there was 500 people there, and the new general manager had done things that were not in the best interest of the employees, and they knew it, and they were ready to mass exodus. And she got in his ear and said, this is a culture issue. We need to call this woman. So in meeting them, and they hired me and my team went over there and we did a level set, which is one of Keen's initial programs. And a level set is a version of a leadership immersion, not that different than Ignite Power, but Ignite Power is focused on women. But in this level set, we gave them opportunity after opportunity, challenge after challenge to solve problems as a team. And they couldn't get it done, and they couldn't get it done, and they couldn't get it done. And they were arguing, and they were frustrated, and they were giving up. And Tiffany would like raise her hand and ask for permission. Hello, I have an idea. And nobody would listen. And then we'd say, Tiffany, have yourself be heard. And then she would yell, and they still wouldn't listen. And finally, after 4 hours of them trying to solve these problems back and forth, coaching, out of coaching, Tiffany got grounded by one of my teammates and got access to her internal power. And she's pregnant, she's ready to have a baby. She gets on a chair, somebody holds the chair for her. And she said, listen, you guys, you are never listening to me, and I have the answer. And if you would stop working for 5 minutes and hear me out, I have the answer. And everybody was silent. And she got to, from standing on this chair, look down at these people and at the challenge ahead of them and walked them through how to solve the problem. 30 minutes later, they were done with a 4-hour challenge. And that was Tiffany's beginning of her journey. And if you want to see more about her, you can check her out on my website. She started with us and with that company as a labor relations manager, and she's now a chief talent strategist. And it was a 1.5 years of her doing deep excavation on who she is as a leader and what's in her way. Now, we boiled that down to 2.5 days in Ignite Power, but we learned from the people that we coached of what was needed and how to get the message across in 2.5 days. So let's talk about the promises of today and the promises of our 2.5-day retreat. But before I do that, I want to ask you, why did you register for this program? We had in excess of 115 people register for our program. I'd like to know why. You're not going to have an opportunity to share with me because it's a webinar, but write it down. What would have the next 45 minutes be absolutely and totally worth your time? What do you want for yourself in the next year of your life? With or without COVID, with or without a whatever it's called, a vaccine, with or without your ideal job, with or without the power that you want others to give you, what would have this year be worthy of your time? And take a minute and write that down. So first of all, what we want you to get out of your time with us is we want you to tap into your motivation to make this year the year that there's no looking back. This year, the year that you own your power, that you are clear where you're headed, and you don't have to have any buy-in from anyone else that it's the right thing to do. I'm sorry that the camera's getting fuzzy. I don't know what's happening, but I'm going to keep rolling with this and maybe take myself off camera if I have to. What would have this year be the year for you? Whether it's the best year yet or the year you staked your claim, having no holes barred, what would have to happen? Second, we're going to talk about daily disciplines or the power hour that some people in the industry of transformation and personal well-being talk about. But what would be the disciplines that you use to tap into your innate wisdom, to turn on your internal power, and to move forward in action, taking the right yeses and the right nos to get you where you want to be, to operate in peak performance, as Tony Robbins says. 3, we're going to give you an invitation to go deeper and join us in our Ignite Power Retreat, February 18th, 19th, and 20th. It is remote, and it's an extraordinary experience that we hope to share with you. So Stephanie, later on, if you can cue up that video so that we're not looking to get it from my screen. Thank you. So right now, and in the world, it's important to know that people have 4 fundamental needs. 4 fundamental ingrained needs, whether you're aware of it or not. People have a need for certainty. The brain, your executive brain, your prefrontal cortex has a need to know what's happening next and next and next and next. And that need for certainty has been disrupted in the year 2020 and early 2021 already, more than it's probably ever been in your life unless you lived in New York during 9/11. So this need for certainty, we have pathways in the brain and the brain loops and it needs to find patterns. That's why with children or puppies, I have one right now, they need structure. They need to know what time bedtime is. They need to know what time lunchtime is. They need to know what time dinner time is, what time story time is. The human being needs structure at some level, and some people need more structure than other people. Also, people have a need for uncertainty. If you don't like that word, variety, change, excitement, novelty. It's part of the 5 keys to neuroplasticity. In order to grow, you need new experiences. Well, if you've been in your home for the better part of a year, and if you're normally used to traveling and you're not traveling, or you're normally used to seeing your friends and family and you're not doing that, you don't have a lot of uncertainty right now. So whenever we're not getting our fundamental needs met, there is dis-ease in our body, in our spirit, in our mind. Also, human beings like you and me have a need for connection with other people. This need to hug and touch. It releases oxytocin in a chemical in our brain and has us feel safe. Well, if you haven't been touched or touching or connected any other way but Zoom, the mind, the body, the spirit is in dis-ease. And then significance, a feeling that what you do matters. So these are fundamental needs, and most of us are not getting our fundamental needs met at least in the last 12, maybe 11 months. And so in Ignite Power, we're going to talk not only about those needs, but you're going to dig deep about what are your fundamental needs and what do you need to do to make sure those needs are met. Because you see, if your needs aren't met, you can't operate at your highest level of effectiveness. If your needs are met, if your needs are not met, you're not going to be as self-expressed as you are. If your needs are not met, you're not going to be as loving and warm and kind as you normally would be, because you're a human being and there's chemicals and hormones that run your body whether you want that to happen or not. So next is we're going to, in Ignite Power, and a little bit right now, we're going to have you envision your future. And there's a great article in Fortune magazine about the owner of Got Junk. Got Junk, think about it. Those guys come into your house and they get $300, $400, $500, $1,000 to take your junk and drag it away. That CEO happened to be a man. That CEO not only created his vision, he painted it. He literally went through an exercise of creative self-expression, tapping into the right hemisphere, the part of our brain that is creativity. And he envisioned his future. We're going to do something like that in Ignite Power. But right now, I'm going to give you a mini version. This is from the book, Journey to the Heart by Melody Beattie. And it's called Discover Your Own Truth. And if you want to participate, please close your eyes. Settle into your seat, feel your bum on the chair, your feet on the floor, rub your feet on the floor so you can feel yourself grounding, feel the skin beneath your clothing, and go on a little mini journey with me. No truth is ours until we make it our own. All the truths in the world don't matter unless we discover them to be true for ourselves. This is what the journey is about. An insight, a lesson, a new belief is at the end of each adventure, whether that adventure happens in a moment, in an hour, in a day, in a 2.5-day retreat, or in a year. This lesson doesn't come from books, although books might help. This kind of lesson only comes from an experience. It doesn't come from classes or lectures or really well-meaning friends telling us what they think we should do. The lessons we are seeking come from inside us, from our hearts, from our deep abiding connection to consciousness and truth. It springs quietly from within as we notice one day that we believe something new, something different, something more freeing, more fun, and more life-enhancing than we believed before. For a moment, we may turn back and say, why didn't I get that? Why didn't I see that? How come I didn't know that before? But then we have a choice to step back on the path, laugh at ourselves, and go on our way understanding we have now grown. We are now new and we can begin again. We don't need to know everything in advance, but we need to allow ourselves to go freely through all the lessons that teach us so we know who we are and where we're going. You're on a journey of discovery. The journey begins with 2021. Find out what's true for you. Remember, a truth isn't a truth until it's yours. So with your eyes closed, imagine it's a year from now. I want you to think about your relationship with your significant other. What would have this be a pivotal year in your relationship? What kind of things would need to be happening? And please don't go down the road, well, COVID would have to be over and I'd have to have a vaccine, because you have no control over that. The only thing you have control over is you and how you interpret what's happening around you. And you have all the control in the world because your thoughts control your experience, and nobody controls your thoughts but you. What would have this be an extraordinary year for you and your kids? Maybe you and your parents. How about at work? In whatever career you're in, what would have this be the year that you're fully self-expressed? What would need to happen? Maybe in fitness. Envision that and write that down. And then the rest of our time together, keep coming back to that envision. We don't have time to have you paint, otherwise we would do that. So next, I want you to look at what's in the way. What's in the way for you? We all have limiting beliefs. We all have limiting behaviors. We all have strengths that we overuse to the point of we are really good at one thing, but when we use that strength in our relationship with our significant other, that doesn't feel too good to them, and it doesn't wind up very good for us. So what are our beliefs, our behaviors, our attitudes that constrain us? So I want to share a big one for me was at the beginning of, so last year, my goal was I was going to lead 14 level sets. We were going to transform 14 companies, which would be double of what we normally do. By still serving our existing book of business, we were going to add 14 more. Well, we had $700,000 worth of contracts on our books as of March 1st. As of March 20th, everything evaporated. All speaking engagements, all level sets, all retreats, everything evaporated. And I felt like I was not standing on firm ground. I felt like I was on flagstone that was moving like an earthquake, and I had to balance myself. And I talked to one of my coaches, Ken, and he said, so you can't do anything about COVID. You can't do anything about the pandemic. You can only do something about your thinking about the pandemic. And in that moment, it rang true from me, from my past, that whenever we are self-absorbed, I don't want to get sick. I don't want my business to go under. I don't want my kids to get sick. I don't want my mom to get sick. Whenever we're self-absorbed, our thoughts take on a life of their own, and mostly they're a spin-out cycle. So I started thinking about how can I contribute? How can I contribute for other people? And instead of having my open schedule be a roadblock for me, my team and I started leading response agility workshops, and we started doing it online, and we led over 30 of them for free. And we taught people how to navigate stress, pressure, disappointment, uncertainty. And then I started enrolling in all these classes and doing all the things that I never had time for. But it took me first looking at what was in the way in order to dismantle it. So for you, when you think about that future you want to live into, what would have this year be the year that you break through? What's in your way? Are you addicted to the news? Are you waiting for the vaccine? Are you waiting for permission that the new president is going to make everything okay? Are you waiting for somebody from your family or your boss to tell you that you got that raise or that you're going to get that job? What's in the way for you? Write it down so you can get really clear about it. So let's talk about what we wish life looked like and what life actually looks like. So 20 years ago, I created my future. I'm going to live in Northern California. I'm going to be in the world of transformation, leading mind, body, spiritual retreats. I didn't know they'd be called level sets, but that was my future, right? And then what happened is something called 9/11. And let's see if I can point to it. My first big dip, I had a 14,000 square foot office. I had a bunch of employees. And in one day, we went from being busier than we'd ever been because the Y2K expansion of everybody that was doing recruiting then blew up in our faces after 9/11. We were not busy at all. We went from 70 open job orders to 2. Very similar to what happened in COVID. But I had a choice. Many of my friends went out of business that year. Many agencies in Chicago went out of business. I lost like friends and colleagues. I mean, just disappeared, moved out of the area, gave up. But I didn't do that. I negotiated the lease because I had this future that was calling me. I negotiated the lease on a handshake. And I got out of this 14,000 square foot lease. And I went into a small office space on the first floor. And the business made it. We survived. Not that different than, I think about It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart when they had the $8,000. We made it. And the business sustained for another 8 years until I sold it. Now, the next big hiccup I had was the housing crisis in 2008. See if I can point to it. I had a staffing firm. I had a McMansion in Illinois. Now I had been going to financial webinars and workshops. Back then they didn't have webinars, workshops. And they said, you should not be having a McMansion. You should not be driving a Lincoln Navigator. Pare down. And I heard it and I heard it and I heard it. Well, one day I woke up and I said, it's time to sell the house. Put the house on the market. This was in Arlington Heights, Illinois. And in 5 days, my house sold. I got $999,000 for that house. It was enough. I could pay off my mortgage and the line of credit and all the stuff I had to have. And 5 days later, the housing market hit. And that house was now worth $545,000. But I escaped because I already had, my house was like, they bought it for cash. I got really lucky. But was it luck? Or was it that I was tuned in and I knew when to listen and when to act? Tap into your innate wisdom, turn on your power, and move forward. Was it that? Maybe, but I got lucky. Same time period, I sold my staffing firm. And then a year later, and then during that time, I wanted to do consulting. And so we took our Keen Hire program and started consulting. First customer I went to with Keen Hire, Norman Brooks, first customer. I did this role analysis process that I used to do for free, but I said I was charging for it now because I wasn't in staffing anymore. He not only paid us $2,500 for that process, he said, you guys don't do coaching, do you? Yes, we do. He gave us 13 coaching contracts in 2 days. Like a miracle. I was thinking I was going to have to live off my retirement, and here's Norman Brooks giving us 13 coaching contracts. So it was a hole. It was a divot. Whoop, just learning this new software. It was a divot, and we climbed out of it. And for 2 years, we worked with that company and coached all their leaders and helped them reorganize HR, and even some people on this webinar I met during that time period. And then I had the opportunity to move to California. But it wasn't like somebody said, move to California. It was a calling that I had. The time is now. Now, maybe the timing was off a little because it was 2010 and people still weren't hiring. And I was moving to California to turn Keen Hire, conscious hiring, into a software. Everything I had sold, I put in storage, and the rest of it, I brought in a 4x6 truck and moved out here with nothing but maybe $20,000. And I started interviewing people to turn Keen Hire into a software. And I thought, this is going to happen. I had the best coach ever. I went in, I found the right person. I went into engagement. Brought my partner, Stephanie Marbury. She kept flying here back and forth. We built the software. 1 year later, the week before it was going live, Stephanie said, tired of working for free. I want you to pay me. And he didn't consult me at all. I was his partner. He fired her. So I'm getting a strange text message and I'm not answering it. And the phone's ringing. And finally I answer and it's her. And she said, I've been terminated. And I walked into his office. I said, you don't have the right to do that. He said, I have the right to do anything I want. And if you don't like it, you can leave because we have your intellectual property. We have your son and we don't need you and we don't need her. And in that moment, I knew I was, you know what? I went home. I was in a deep, deep, deep state of despair. And I didn't know what to do. And my son came into my room, same kid who worked at that company. And he said, this is not what the woman who raised me would do. Get up and stand up for your rights and do what you need to do. And so a week later, I filed a lawsuit to get my intellectual property back. And to make a long story short, it took 2 years, but I got the intellectual property back. It's now in queue as a beta for a software for behavioral interviewing. And I got a little bit of money. But the point is, I'll share later if there's time, but I certainly share and ignite power. The washing machine spin cycle I went through during that process. The majority of the people in that company were men. Actually, her and I were the only two women, and they fired her. The board was men. It was venture capital backed. And when I was telling them that I wanted out, they kept saying, don't abort the baby. The baby's going to be born tomorrow. Don't abort the baby. You would never abort a baby in the final trimester. Who would ever talk to a man like that? And I started to see how women were treated when they acted in a principled way and stood up for what they believed in. And it wasn't pretty. But at that point, I wasn't prepared to do anything about it until Tiffany entered my life. So I want to talk about the 7 levels of individual, group, and organizational effectiveness. And I want you to consider these 7 levels as you're thinking about your life and the future you want to create. The first level of ineffectiveness is hopelessness. This is like the sound, if you heard it, like just exasperated, like I was when I was laying in my bed, not wanting to get up at 11 o'clock in the morning. I didn't know what to do. I had already spent the time to build the software. We were ready to go to market, and I didn't have a leg to stand on. I think I told you that we went into development on a handshake. And if I didn't, I'm telling you now. There was no contract. So he could fire me at a whim. He could fire Stephanie. He could take me out of being owner. As a matter of fact, after this whole thing happened with Stephanie, and I said it, I'm not bought into that. The day before we were going to go live, he said, you're no longer 50% owner, you're 10% owner. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to do behavioral interviewing and workflow for interviewing. We're going to compete with LinkedIn. Like, that was not at all what I wanted. So I was hopeless. And I didn't know what to do about it. What I wound up doing about it is going to see a therapist. I called Kaiser. I got in to see a therapist. And that was my first step. And I, in my whole life, had never gone to therapy or counseling, but I thought I was losing it. So I go to him and he says, honey, you don't need happy pills. You don't even need therapy. What you need is to take action so you can get out of the fear that you're in. He was the person that told me to file the lawsuit. Not that I needed him to tell me. It was already in the back of my mind. I was already thinking about it, but I was afraid. And I was afraid, and I grew up in recruiting. You know, people who file lawsuits have bad raps. It carries with them forever. So I had some blind spots that I even deserved to get my IP back. So the day I filed that lawsuit, called CLC and said, I want to get my IT back, the fear dissipated. But before that, I was running. I always used to run in this Vasona Park, beautiful loop in Northern California. And I'm running, and everybody I ran across, like, you know, you run by, had like this frown, and they seemed sad, and they seemed worried. And even the guy at Starbucks seemed sad and worried. And at that point, I didn't get that I was sad and worried, projecting it to everybody I see. By the way, that is how the mind works. When you are sad and worried and afraid, what you resist persists. What you think about, you project. And so when you're below the power and freedom line in this model, all of your negative energy, all of your hopelessness energy, all of your fear, all of your frustration, everything it touches is projected back to you. But I didn't know it at the time. I just thought everybody was really crazy. And I will share how that shifted for me just a week later after I filed the lawsuit in a minute. The next stage of ineffectiveness is frustration. This is when you are pissed off, angry, annoyed, had enough. You're not going to take anymore. In the corporate environment, when this happens, you see a lot of fighting. You see a lot of blaming, a lot of shaming. In personal relationships, you see parents yelling at their children. When you're in frustration, you are at the highest level of ineffectiveness, and it's still ineffective because you can't see straight. Remember, you got adrenaline. Well, maybe you didn't know this, but I'll tell you now, adrenaline and cortisol shooting out from your amygdala, which is sandwiched. Like if you were to drill a hole from the top of your head above your ear, it's like a little almond-shaped organ in your brain. And it was created originally, but it's the only part of the brain that hasn't grown up or evolved. And so every time we are angry, fearful, or hopeless, our brain reacts the same way as it would react if a saber-toothed tiger was coming to kill us. There's no sense. There's no common sense is not available to us. And this is really important for you multitaskers and you people who work at a level 10 on a pace of 1 to 10 all day long. Common sense is not available Wisdom is not available when you're operating in the machine, in the gerbil machine. It's just not available. And this is not just Margaret or Maji talking. This is neuroscience talking. Common sense disappears when adrenaline and cortisol is flooding our executive brain. We have no access to it. And remember, below the line, it metastasizes like cancer. And we give it to everybody we live with. We give it to our kids. If we're afraid, your kids are afraid. If you're angry, your kids are angry. You might not believe me, but take notice after this call. So let's talk about better days. We move into courage. The day I filed the lawsuit, I went running at the same path. It was the same time of day. It was a week later. Nobody looked angry or sad. Everyone looked happy. As a matter of fact, I would swear to God, I saw halos around their head. And then when I went to Starbucks, they were so nice to me. And I didn't even get it at the time. I just said, wow, wow. And then my coach had to say, honey, you're projecting. And then I started learning more and more about neuroscience, like heavy neuroscience in the last 7 years. Because the brain and the mind are pretty powerful, more than we ever thought. If you haven't watched Limitless or Lucy, even though they're wild and crazy stories, they give you a sense of what happens when people are operating above the line in courage and in engagement. When we are operating in engagement, we have and courage and innovation, which is coming, and synchronicity. Hormones are released. Hormones like oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine. These are like the feel good. That's where they got the word dope from, dopamine. Some people have to smoke pot. Some people just go running or do yoga. And they've got this experience of, wow, everything is possible. So just like below the line, the negativity metastasizes. Above the line, the power and freedom, you just see so much more expansively. In engagement, if you're in an organization and people are in engagement, you don't really need a diversity program or an inclusion program. It's already happening. It's in the DNA of the organization. You can't fake engagement. And an engagement survey isn't going to tell you if people are engaged. Their contribution is going to tell you if they're engaged. Next is innovation. This is when people are working together beyond all limits. They don't see limits. They see opportunities, and they're collaborating and they're connecting and they're pushing up against problems and challenges. And they're truly giving away their agenda and their personal identity for what's possible. And when we do this in our personal life, we start to do things like register for a program we've never registered for before, or we sign up for a triathlon and we've never done a triathlon, or we finally decide we're booking that trip for 2022 to Patagonia and we're going for it, or we're going to Machu Picchu. We're doing something we've never done before, and we have zero evidence that we will know how to do it, but we're going for it. It begins at courage, and innovation is where it's a slam dunk. And finally is synchronicity. And this is when we realize that everything that's happening in the world, everything, if I'm having a hard time finding the right man, then I know I got to look at me. Why aren't I finding the right man? Why am I dating people who are not qualified for the job of husband? That's my issue. It's not their issue. Why is my boss not honoring his appointments with me? Why didn't I get a raise? Why am I making less than my counterparts? How come nobody listens when I talk? When you're in synchronicity, you get that life is a mirror, and everything that happens is just an opportunity for wisdom to emerge and for growth to emerge. And that's the 7 levels. And we go deep into this in the Ignite Power Retreat. We also do it in all of our corporate work as well. So let's move on to limits. So when you are in frustration, in hopelessness, in fear, what gets in your way? Yes, the thinking and the behavior, but what is your flavor? So my flavor of my saboteur is a crack whore. So in psychology, your first psychology course in college, everyone has a golden shadow, which now they talk about. That's the highest level of consciousness, and a dark shadow, which is like your saboteur in the coaching schools will talk about that. Or, your dark shadow. Well, mine is a crack whore. And I live in Santa Cruz, California, and there are a lot of crack people in Santa Cruz, California. So I find it interesting that I could face it every day if I wanted to. But here's how a crack whore shows up in my life, is a deep, deep fear of being homeless, poor, on the street, not being able to pay my bills. So what is a person who has a little devil on her shoulder? Don't fail. You can't fail. You can't fail. She books herself solid. There's a book yourself solid. I don't need that book. I am book solid. I need to learn how to do better with less. So maybe I need to raise my rates. Like, that's a possibility. But when my limiting thinking is taking over, I'm scheduled from 7:30 to 8, from 8 to 8:15, from 8:15 to 9, from 9 to 10, from 10 to 11, from 11 to 12, I have a lunch, maybe from 12 to 1, but then 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, with no break to pee, no break to get a drink of water. And that is completely limiting. And it's something I am working on. And I do this for a living. So I ask you, what are the limiting behaviors or belief in your way? And not just what are they, but how do they show up? What does the saboteur say to you? Like, my saboteur says, if you don't take that client when they want you to take them, they're going somewhere else. So now I'm working Saturday mornings and Tuesday nights. And even Stephanie, who works as my partner, a different Stephanie, but she was around back then too. She even has the same thing. We have to do this. We have to do this. We have to do this, or they might go away. But that whole conversation of scarcity of time is a limit for me. My question for you is, what's your limit for you? So I want to, I don't know, Precious, are you here? And are you a panelist? I'll speak for Precious since she's not here right now, but Precious is one of the women who took Ignite Power last time. We had it in September. It was the first remote Ignite Power that we ever did. And Precious is a CEO of a hospital, of multiple hospitals. Now we're in COVID. So the fact that she took time on a weekend to do a retreat for herself is miraculous. And in the retreat, and I wish she could share, but she'll share in the next retreat, is she realized she wasn't taking care of herself. She wasn't putting her own oxygen mask on. She was so busy being of service to everybody else that she wasn't taking time to nurture. And now for our next Ignite Power, Precious has come back as a group leader, and she's sending 11 people, 11 women on her team to this retreat because it was so impactful for her. So Precious, if you're here, thank you for letting me speak for you. So you've got the vision for your future. You have a list of your limits, what's in your way, your beliefs, how they show up in life. Is it your mother when she calls? Oh God, there it is. But write it down, make sure you have it now. What it's going to require is for you to tap in to your highest level of effectiveness every single day. There's people in the industry that call it the power hour. I call it morning ritual. One of the people on this webinar used to work for me, and I share my calendar with everybody, and she goes, I'd like to understand what this Maji practices her morning ritual is. And what it is 20 years ago, I started doing 5 sun salutations every single morning when I woke up. Then I added 8-minute abs to the 5 sun salutations. Then I added 5 push-ups per sun salutation. So now we got 25 push-ups, 8-minute abs, which is about 140 abs. And then we have this sun salutation, which I'm learning to do it much slower as I learn more about how the mind works. And in the last 2 years, I added meditation. And I really turned on the meditation strong during COVID because I needed to ground myself. I needed to come home to me, to my innate wisdom, to my highest level of intelligence, to my core values. I needed to tune in and turn on, because left up to my own devices, it's get out of bed, grab the iPhone, look and see who's called, because after all, I have to succeed and I don't want to miss any emails, and then a latte. And especially if I make my own latte, it's even better. I can have 2. And that's my morning. And there is no connecting to my highest self. There is no, who am I today? What do I want to create? It just right away goes into action. And there is scientific evidence that says that this thing that we are, this human being, needs time to connect mind, body, soul, the human spirit, to what our vision is and what's important, so we can behave in a conscious manner, not our habituated behavior that we're dragging with us from grade school or high school or 6 years old or 8 years old. So the power hour allows us to tune in, to turn on, and to tap in and move forward effectively. So what are you doing? What can you do for that time? And maybe you start with 5 minutes. Maybe you start with 15 minutes. Maybe you start with 20 minutes. And by the way, I'll give you something that's made a big difference for me. His name is Bob Roth, and he's part of the David Lynch Foundation. And every day at 6:15 Pacific, or you can do the math for Central or Eastern, he gives a free meditation. There's over 6,000 people every single morning. It's a 20-minute meditation. He talks about neuroscience for 5 minutes. Then he does meditation. Then he reads a poem like Invictus or one of the Marianne Williamsons, or he gives us a word of the day. And it makes a huge difference for operating from this level of consciousness. And I know some of you might be saying, what does she mean, consciousness? Consciousness to me is being aware and awake to what your actions are, your reactions are, and who you choose to be and how you show up. And it's not a right versus wrong, a good versus bad. It's just an opportunity to be aware and say, was I at my best? Do I got to apologize for something? Because I don't really like the way that came off. See, if you're operating on autopilot, waking up, looking at the phone, responding to text messages and emails, really hard to be present, really hard to tune in. You'd have to be a machine. Even the Dalai Lama says he doesn't operate in synchronicity more than 1% of the time. And the guy meditates all the time. So let's talk about attending a retreat with Keen. Stephanie, I'd like you to show the video, and then we'll have Eileen go. If you can, I want to give you a little glimpse of the video that was made from the last Ignite Power. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us.
Who I am as a leader.
Who I am as a leader
is courageous,
dedicated,
powerful,
passionate,
innovative, honest, approachable,
energetic, and unstoppable. The pandemic has been a great opportunity for me and everyone to pause and reflect on what's important to us.
Through this whole weekend, I've realized that confidence is just being okay with being scared.
The possibilities of what could come by just being me was just powerful.
I've learned to set boundaries, work through fear, honor my promises to myself, and trusted my intuition.
What if you had such an incredible amount of gratitude for the person you are, the resourcefulness you have, the humans you've surrounded yourself with, and the amount of love that people have for you, all of the challenges you've lived through, and all the possibilities that await you, and that you can create, that every moment of stress could be met with an equal moment of peace. So in Ignite Power, you have an opportunity with us to create an event, an inspiring future, to not only tap into your core values, but to define them and to put together a roadmap that helps you live those values. We teach you how to tap into your internal guidance system and really understand this thing called mind, thought, and consciousness. We call it the IGS, the internal guidance system. And then you get an opportunity to work with a community of women and a coach and a group leader who work with you the entire weekend to accomplish what you want to accomplish. So we also, for every 3 people that register, we are giving a scholarship away. If you know of any women who could take advantage, who would really this would make a difference for. And they would want to come to the retreat, but they can't afford the $499. They can apply for a scholarship on the Ignite Power webpage, which Stephanie will put into the chat now. There is a button that says for social good. And last time we had 5 people that came on the scholarship, and it really, really, really was awesome. Okay, so I want Eileen to unmute herself and show her camera and tell us about her experience with Ignite Power. And I see that she's here, so I'll stop talking.
Yeah, hi. I don't know if you guys can see. Oh, here we go. Start video. Sorry about that. Hi. That was super exciting seeing the video of what we went through. It brought back so many memories. Before Ignite Power, I would overthink everything in meetings. And more often than not, I would keep my thoughts and my ideas and opinions inside because I lacked the confidence to tell that voice in my head to step aside. I was too comfortable being the support in the background, and I couldn't enjoy being the face of my work. I was also embarrassed to be good. I would get told from people who knew what I did that I was a badass, and honestly, that would make me go further into my shell. I don't know why compliments made me so uncomfortable, but they did. I let that voice control my thoughts and my emotions and my personality, and I lost my authentic self. It was impossible for me to be present in the moment, let alone contribute to the moment. One of the most important takeaways from that weekend was knowing that I wasn't alone. I would be listening to these amazing women share their stories and be vulnerable, but talking nervously and expressing their lack of confidence. And I remember thinking, like, wow, you guys are incredible. And then I took a look in the mirror and a light bulb went off, like, well, shit, maybe I'm incredible too, you know? And I'm now able to recognize when that voice tries to creep back in and override my thoughts, my true thoughts. And I realized it's okay if I don't know the answer. It's empowering to just put myself out there. Ignite Power helped pave the path for me to be a better version of myself. In trusting in myself and finding my voice, I'm having conversations, I'm building relationships, I'm initiating conversations that I never would have before. Initiating conversations is huge for me. I'm talking to my kids about being true to themselves. I'm goal setting personally and professionally. I've never been a goal setter, and I'm doing that now. For the first time in my life, I actually can see what I want, and I'm going to make it a reality. I'm holding myself accountable. I have a wonderful new friend, Kathleen. I don't know if you're out there, Kathleen, but she holds me. I just inspired.
Awesome. Thank you. And Eileen has...
You're welcome. Thank you.
Eileen has been so inspired by Ignite Power that she's a stand to bring it to her company, which is predominantly male dominated. And they have 60 women who want this and want what she has. And so thank you, Eileen, and thanks for being here today. Okay, so our marketing company, which we love, Kelly and Yako, wants us to have a special offer today. And the special offer is you get $100 off if you register for the retreat by midnight tonight. Not tomorrow, not next week, by midnight tonight. And Stephanie will put in the chat box, or Kelly will put in the chat box how to do that. Or you're going to get an email, actually. It's probably in your inbox right now with the special offer. Also, remember, for every 3 people that register, you are sending another woman to Ignite Power on a scholarship. So again, my camera is crazy. We're learning all this technology. All right, so I would like you to consider what you experienced today, what you learned, what you can take away with you. And I don't think we can take volunteers, Steph. I'm not sure if we can do that. If somebody wants to volunteer what they got out of this webinar and what's one thing they can take away, that would be wonderful. But if it's too hard because we're on a webinar and not a meeting, then we won't do that.
Yeah,
Um,
we could, if anyone would like to share, if you'd like to put into the chat or raise your hand, I could promote you to a panelist temporarily here.
And thank you very much for your time. Thank you for dealing with our crazy technology. We're trying to get into the 2021 with a little Zoom on steroids, and some days it works and some days it doesn't. But thank you so much for your time. And if there's anyone, I'll be quiet so we can see if anybody wants to share.
Margaret, as always, you're inspiring. I just enjoyed, my takeaway was, you know, we're all challenged with challenges, and it's really important that you let it in and be your true authentic self. And with Ignite Power and all the messaging you're giving to really help empower women is so meaningful and so on target. So I just thoroughly enjoyed my time today, and I just want to say thank you. And I'm excited to continue a journey of self-discovery.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody, very much. Steph, please stay on, and Kelly, bye. Thank you, thank you, thank you.